Okay, hi everybody. We're looking at the second part today of of week 11. So we're going to be looking at family systems therapy. And this is a really interesting therapy, and one I think if you really kind of like the thought of being a counsellor, you would really enjoy the rich variety and the interaction with the people. And also it's a kind of therapy where you see things happen kind of right before your very eyes. So we're going to have a look at family therapy and maybe in another video, family systems. Feminist theory, sorry, maybe in another video, feminist theory. So today we're going to identify the goals of family systems and in another video, feminist theory, describe the therapeutic relationship in both and explain the importance of systems and cultural constructs. We're going to explain the importance of the monitoring progress and describe techniques that are used in both, and then explain the disadvantages and advantages. So here are your readings. Please make sure you download those. They are on Moodle. So I guess the first thing to ask is, who are you in your family, and how has the role that you hold played out in life outside of the family? So why do we ask this? I mean, look at that little picture of a family. It is because people in families tend to take on different roles, and we have learnt about this through Adlerian therapy, haven't we? Where, you know, the middle child is different from the oldest child and so forth. But then when you expand that idea and think about the mother and the father and the roles they've played, and then expand it further and think about the aunts and uncles and the grandma and so forth, and the influence they have and the role they have, you get an idea about what family systems theory is about. So this is the perspective that it takes. A person is an autonomous individual capable of free and independent choice. Okay, we know that. We're born, we have free and independent choice. A person is born into a family and lives the entire life attached to one form of family or another, hopefully. In the family, the person discovers who he or she is and develops and changes, receives and gives support. So they are involved in the dynamic. You, yourself, think about it now. You are involved in a dynamic in your family. You are a sister, you are a brother, or you're an only child. You have one or possibly two parents and aunts and uncles and so forth. And you are who you are because of that family dynamic. What people sort of expect of you and the way that you've been brought up has informed you about yourself. So in the family, the person creates, maintains and lives by rules which are often unspoken, and routines that they hope will keep the family and each of its members functional. So when we talk about unwritten rules, we're talking about the things that you know you should be doing, or you know you have to do in order to maintain, peace, I guess. So the assumptions of the family systems theory are that every person is best understood through assessing the interaction between and among family members. So you are not just you. This takes a very different perspective from phenomenological, doesn't it? Where I just look at you and your perspective. With family systems theory, I look at you in relation to other people, or you look at your client in that way. And so the development and behaviour of one family member is connected and interconnected with others in the family. Symptoms are considered as an expression of a set of habits and patterns of the family. So your client comes to you and says, I'm a very shy person. I really want to get over feeling so shy. I don't like the way that I am. Well, we could apply many different approaches, couldn't we? We've learnt lots of different approaches up until now, but in family systems theory, we would want to get an idea about how, the habits and patterns of your family have caused you to feel painfully shy. My client to feel painfully shy. So a person's problem could be a symptom of how the family functions and not only a person's maladjustment of life. And so the family functioning the way they do, always putting this person down, my client who is very shy, that because they always became the younger, the scapegoat, I don't know, for some reason, that activity has caused, my client to feel down about themselves. So think about yourself now. Think, is that something that you have experienced? Is it something that you've seen in your life? Do you know of someone like that? Maybe painfully shy, but you can see that it's got to do with the family. Now, it's not a judgment on the family, because that family is coping. That family is habituated to function in that way because it keeps the peace. So, family is an interactional unit with its own set of unique traits, and thus the therapy is focused on the interpersonal relationships. So family systems therapy is all about the relationships and the dynamics in a family. So family relationships are a principal source of mental health and psychopathology for individuals. So people who come to you will often have difficulties with family. Then you can take a family systems theory approach. Family interaction patterns tend to repeat across generations. This might be something new to you, but think about it. Think about your own family. Thinking about the way that your grandmother was with your mother. Think about the way that your mother is with you. Right? So you're thinking about how the pattern seems to be repeating itself, and it makes sense because your mother would have learnt a certain type of behaviour from her own mother, your grandmother, which then got repeated with you. And yet you're not obliged to then go and repeat that with your own children. You may want to stop that maladaptive behaviour because it's causing you pain, whereas your mum might have accepted it, and perhaps your grandmother did too. And so the repetition across generations can be stopped through family systems therapy. The theory holds that family health requires a balance of connection and individuation. So you get this sense of certain people in the family are very close, very clingy together. Oh, my sister always talks to my mother, not me. I always talk to my grandmother, right? You might say that about yourself. Or my brother always talks to me, but not to my dad. I have to relay information. Those connections and those bonds. But also what we're looking for in a good, healthy family is that everyone is an individual. So I can function on my own without talking to someone else, for all my problems, say, for example. Or I can function on my own because I feel strong enough. I have that self-confidence. And that's the sign of a positive, sort of family dynamic. Family flexibility is a core trait that prevents family dysfunction because things happen all the time in life. There are changes, new children, moving house, illness, upset. And if the family can't be flexible, then it becomes dysfunctional, or may become dysfunctional, or may use its dynamic. So the way that it goes about doing things, mum's at the head of the family, and if she says everything is all right, then it's all right. But if mum's in trouble, how are we going to know that everything's all right? Right? So the triad is the minimum unit for complex understanding of family interactions. So the triad is between the parents and the child. And individual symptoms frequently have meaning within the family's interaction patterns or worldview. So when a person comes to you with a particular symptom, let's look at shyness again. Shyness is okay. Who cares about shyness? You're shy, you're shy. It doesn't matter. In the real world, it doesn't matter if people are shy. But shyness, what we mean here is that shyness will have a specific meaning for that person because of the family dynamic. For example, no one in the family was shy, only that person. And because they were, they got picked on. And so shyness is a real shameful thing. It's an embarrassment. And so the individual symptoms, the shyness, has meaning within the family's interactive pattern or worldview. It's only bad in that family. Hopefully that makes sense. Please make sure that you're writing things down when things don't make sense. Just write down a couple of words, stop the recording, and then restart it again when you've made your notes. And that's kind of the key. I hope that you've gathered that already. The key to using these videos is to stop and start, stop and start. Stop, write down your notes, and start again. Okay, I'll continue. So actions by an individual person in the family will influence all of the family members. This is also, part of the beliefs around family therapy. Their reactions will have a reciprocal effect on the family, and the problematic behaviour could be seen as a symptom of dysfunctional familial patterns. Dysfunctional familial patterns. Stop and write that down now. Dysfunctional familial patterns are different ways that families function that are not good for the family. But that's the way they do it. They've always done it. And we're going to watch a video about that very shortly. And finally, the person is seen not only in the context of the family, but also in the context of society. So we look at the person holistically. Let's have a look right now at our first video. And it's couples counselling, and it uses these sort of premises that actions by an individual will influence all the family members. The reactions have a reciprocal effect, so they then either give it back to them or do it elsewhere, and so forth. And that the problematic behaviour is seen as a symptom of the dysfunctional family pattern. So here is a really good example that shows all of those things. Let's have a look.
Dan, I've noticed changes in you. And I can't say for certain exactly what's going on, but I just know things are different now and I want to know why. So hopefully we can, get to the bottom of this.
Do you sometimes have the fear that maybe he's found someone else?
I mean, I do. It's, things happen. It's always a possibility when you get married that something could happen.
Does it seem like something that he would not tell you the truth about?
I mean, I don't think it's in his character. I've just been feeling a little insecure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not my character, so I'm not your father.
What do you mean?
Ask her.
Well,
Thank you for saying that. Appreciate it. Anyway, sorry.
because my father left my mother when I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
And it was,
For someone else?
Yeah, for another woman. He got married immediately after he started another family.
And so I'm just wanting to pause here and focus on what we're looking at here. So what we're looking at here is a genogram. It is a pictorial kind of outline, or like a pictograph of what their family looks like. So you've got her father Charles, who was with her mother but left for somebody else. Now, where's Barbara? So Barbara's family, right? So she's here, so she's 10. So her brother is Fred and her sister is Alice. So we know that because round is the girl and square is the boy. We're going to go into this a little bit further soon, but I just wanted this to make sense to you. And Barbara's mother is Dolores and Barbara's father is Charles, and he left the family. So what they're talking about now is, and did you see his reaction to, I'm not your father, thank you for saying that, right? Because, remember the reciprocal comment that we make, people who are treated in a certain way sort of act things out. So she's thinking because the father left the mother, her husband, who is not shown on here, is going to leave her. And yet now that we talk about the father, we might get to the bottom of why she's feeling insecure.
And it was very traumatic.
You had felt close to him when you were growing up.
So now we bring in the father.
Could you maybe talk to your daughter a bit about, what your thinking was about why you had to leave, what went on, and what they did mean to you that I guess you weren't able to tell them at the time?
I think I was going through a very difficult time of my life. I didn't know who I was,
Really?
in terms of who I was as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And to have 3 children didn't help the situation none, because I felt, that I had that responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother wasn't there to help me. It's not that I love you. Believe me, I really, truly, truly love you. But at the time, I was confused.
Mm.
I didn't know what to do.
Mm.
And so I just had to leave in order to get myself together, in order for me to become a person.
But you left to go with another woman.
But she helped me to become the person that I am. She stood by me. She understood me. She listened to me. And that was so important. When a person listens to you, you have to listen. Your mother never listened to me. But she did. Margaret did. So I can't say that's not the only reason why I left, but that was one of the reasons why I left.
Okay, so we can see there that this is how family therapy might look like. You might bring in one person to speak to, and then you might bring in somebody else with your client, and then you might bring in somebody else with your client. So this is all family therapy. It doesn't have to happen kind of all at once. But the premise is here that we need to understand our client, and obviously Barbara was the client there, in relation to what had happened to her in her life. Okay, so we're trying to look at what is happening between them and what might be the causes. And obviously her insecurity is caused by, it seems to be a direct cause, by the father having left and never explaining why. He never explains why. So here's a little question. Do you think that you would like working with a family as opposed to one member of the family? Something for you to think about. Thinking about your theoretical orientation. Is this the sort of theory that you might be interested in, because you get to kind of be a bit broader and kind of understand a bit more about the family, which might help you to help your client a bit better? So what are some of the things that you might need to consider? So think about that. What might be some things that you need to consider when you're doing that kind of therapy? You may need to consider whether other people want to join in. I mean, does the father want to join in? What a fantastic thing that the father actually came. You will often find that in family therapy, the issue becomes people wanting to be a part of it or not. They don't want to be judged, so they say no. So you've got to actually, manage expectations too with your client. So they might be some things that you want to consider. There might be others. Have a think about that. So the family is considered a system. So systems which are composed of units who have some relationship to each other and are organized around these relationships. So a change in one part causes a change in another. I don't know whether that's particularly a great graphic, but I tend to think of it like in terms of cogwheels. When one goes wrong, the others all sort of tend to jar up. And I think that that's also a good way of thinking about it and thinking about how a system works. So we look at family characters and family characteristics, actually. Family characteristics which are problems, even in an individual's psychological systems, which are assumed to be caused by a dysfunctional family characteristic. So, for example, there might be difficult family boundaries and structures. There might be a lack of adaptability and cohesion. So what we mean by that is that family is strict. This is not allowed to happen. That is not allowed to happen. The family rules are very, very structured. And everyone knows that if you break those family rules, you're going to get in trouble, so you don't. And that causes problems to you because in your life you want certain things. But because of your family structure, which is not adaptable and not cohesive, you can't, attain them without being maybe disconnected from your family or excommunicated and so forth. So your clients may have symptoms which relate to the family boundaries and structures which are tight, and may also relate to the nature of family interaction. So rules around who contacts who, for example. Family homeostasis. So when disruption occurs, family members try to regain a stable environment by using strategies that decrease stress and restore balance, and these strategies are not always adaptable or adaptive in the long run. And this is the main thing to remember about families, is that everyone is just trying to get along, right? You are going to get families in which there are certain people who want to make trouble, but basically families, they just seek to get along. And unfortunately, sometimes that means not talking to a certain person, doing a certain thing that you don't want to do, being in alliance with your mother against your sister because it's what you always do. These dynamics. And so this is, these sort of characteristics can be what can cause you, or obviously your client, to feel, psychologically harmed by the dynamic or by what's going on in your family. Boundaries is a really important one. Boundaries are implicit family rules that determine how family members relate to each other, including who talks to who, or spends time with whom, or how decisions are made and by whom, and how much family members know about each other's lives. You think about your big family, if you have one. Who is allowed to talk to whom? Who gets to know what about who? I think about, now I have a very small family personally, right? It's just myself. I don't have any other family. They're all deceased, but I do have a husband, and he has 3 siblings and a couple of sets of parents. And what I notice as a person with no family is I notice that there's kind of like a chain of information that goes. So the information goes to the mother from any of the siblings. The mother disseminates the information to the other siblings and to me, because I'm in the family as well. And then if we have a problem with any of that information, we go back to the mother, which, as a counselor, or sort of as a person who studies kind of human nature, is really hard for me to do. But that's a rule. That is a rule. It's hard for me to do because I just want to approach the person. I just want to say, look, let's sit down and have a talk. But that's not done in this family. So think about your family. What are the rules? Who controls the information? Where does it go? Think about it. There will be something in your family or someone in your family who is, a key person. Stop the video now and write something down. Write something down about boundaries and make notes. Family adaptability. We sort of touched on what that is. A family adaptability refers to the family's rules about who does what and its ability to adapt as necessary. So when there are few rules are not enforced, family functioning is chaotic. So when there are, so what that highlights is that rules are good. going back to my situation here with my husband's mother disseminating information about everything, who's doing what, where, what they said, da da da. If that rule didn't happen, well, number one, none of us would know what was going on with each other, because Tony and his siblings don't really pick up the phone to talk to one another. They would, if the mother was out of the equation, there would be chaos, and they would have to regroup and adapt. They would have to go, okay, who's going to be, the mother figure next? And that person will then become, the one that disseminates information. So, and I believe that Tony's family would be like that. They would be able to adapt. But some families, as in the second paragraph, they are too rigid, and families have trouble adapting to change. So a family that wasn't fluid, that couldn't just, assign new roles to people, that would be very difficult in the long run. And so family life cycles and family functioning, as we know, family life cycles include, major changes. This person wants to get married. This person has been divorced. There's an illness, and so forth. We've talked about, the different changes that can come to a family. Illness, I've said that, but death and so forth. So when there's a key person missing, that is part of the family cycle, and that can be a major source of stress in families. And we've got there as the first point, as families grow, there are developmental tasks that are required. And when a family negotiates these tasks successfully, family roles and structures change. One of the tasks of the family is to mature. It goes from being these young people who are first married, who don't know the first thing about marriage, possibly, 9 times out of 10, who then have their first child, and then they have to adapt and change, and then they might have another child, and then they might have other changes in their life. And it is the job of this family to continue to mature and accept the growing children, and accept them as, growing into adolescence and then into adults, and how does that all happening? So these developmental tasks of the family, which then culminate in the parents getting looked after by the children, that's one of the developmental tasks, or could be seen as in certain cultures. Families have to go through these things, and if it's not an adaptable family, if the family doesn't cope well with this sort of thing, it can lead to stress in one of the individuals or more, and they may come and see you, the counsellor, or a counsellor, for that sort of stuff. And so when the family, second point there, does not or cannot accommodate these changes, stress and symptomatology will occur. And as we know, symptomatology is anxiety, stress, sadness, whatever it is. It is not the normal difficulties that create the problems, but rather the chronic mishandling of problems over time. So on a day-to-day basis, when people adapt, the decisions that they make today may not impact them today, but long term, if they are maladaptive, they will cause issues. And secondly, family dysfunction is often the result of unmet family developmental tasks. So we have there on this slide the family life cycle, which is one thing, and then family function or dysfunction. And I have a video in regards to dysfunctional families. And remember, I mentioned it before. Well, here are an assortment of dysfunctional families. Let me get it to go. Oh, sorry. Don't know why it's not playing.
Growing up in a dysfunctional family is not always obvious. Similar to symptoms of anxiety and depression, the signs may range from mild to severe, which can go unnoticed in everyday lives of toxic families. Here are 5 types of dysfunctional family dynamics. 1. The chronic conflict family.
So I would be writing this down, the chronic conflict family, and then write some notes about what this chronic conflict family does. So grab your pen and paper, write it down. Number 1, chronic conflict family.
In this type of dysfunctional family, members fight with each other in harmful ways that leave one another physically and or emotionally wounded. The tension is breeded from toxic parental styles, such as abusive and authoritarian. The parents will usually be strict, rigid, and unreasonably harsh with their kids. Fear is a tool commonly used by them to maintain control, and punishment methods are often abusive, ill mistreatments that can be traumatizing for the individual. Prolonged conflict within the family can damage a child's neurochemistry, which can create chronic stress, anxiety, depression, and an insecure attachment style as they cultivate relationships with others outside of the household. 2. The pathological household. In this type of family, severe psychological, mental health disorders, terminal illnesses, and substance abuse or drug addiction affect the members' everyday lives. One or both parents may suffer from terminal illnesses, such as cancer, mental disorders like schizophrenia, personality disorders such as borderline personality disorder, or mood disorders like bipolar disorder. Along with drug addiction problems, one or both parents may also have addictions associated with alcoholism or gambling. In the pathological household, the family roles are reversed, in which the children are more responsible and take care of everyday functions, whereas the parents are the ones being looked after. The parents' disorders or illness can cause children to become preoccupied with tasks they aren't meant to handle until they are more mature. This can cause them to develop social deficiencies, anxiety, and depression over time. 3. The chronic household. In this type of family, the children are often poorly looked after when the parents are too busy, not present, or do not set clear and consistent regulations. The parents do not establish any organization, system, or routine that the whole family can follow, which makes it hard for the children to find any grounding or assurance. Often, the older siblings take on the responsibilities the parents have failed to fulfill, and they learn to play the role of the caretakers. Meanwhile, the younger siblings or school-aged children in the chaotic household usually have trouble with discipline, concentrating in school, and listening to authority figures. 4. The dominant submissive household. In this type of family, one parent is the dictator, while the other one is passively obedient. The dictator parent has no considerations for the wishes or feelings of the other family members. This often causes the other parent to feel depressed, and they usually have a lot of repressed, negative, and angry emotions. Consequently, the whole family faces tension, and all the members are extremely unhappy and dissatisfied with their home life. While one parent is controlling and pays little attention to the way their actions affect the whole family, the rest of the members suffer silently from their poor choices, showing little open revolt. 5. The emotionally distant family. This may be one of the least obvious dysfunctional family types. On the outside, nothing is loudly or noticeably chaotic, but behind closed doors, there's very little affection shown between the family members. The parents rarely show warmth towards their children, which teaches them to repress their feelings as they grow older. This brings about an insecure or non-existent attachment, which can negatively affect the child's identity, self-esteem, and their ability to form relationships with others. In this household, communication is rarely open, and the members often choose to deal with their problems alone, instead of seeking help. What type of dysfunctional family dynamic do you resonate with most? We understand that this is a hard topic to talk about, but we strive to be a platform where our community members can open up to each other and support one another. We encourage you to share your story with us below. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more content from...
Okay. So, that was a really interesting video. Please go back and watch it again and make sure you got all the details. Because, you know, thinking about your case studies, there might be an opportunity there for you to explore family systems. And one of the ways that you would, I mean, we've just talked about the theory up until now, but I'm going to go through techniques. And one of the assessments that you might make with your case is that they come from one of these 5 dysfunctional families. So we went through conflict family with authoritarian parents, the pathological household with either mentally ill parents, you know, schizophrenia and so forth, or drug addicted or alcohol addicted parents. Then she said chronic, but chaotic is the third one. Chaotic household where anything goes, there are no rules, and that can be very destabilizing. or dominant submissive, where the father is very dominant or mother is very dominant and the other parent is very submissive. And in this way, you get a very, the other parent develops depression, which can then lead the children to feel insecure, and they then, have trouble creating relationships, and they can, they can also experience depression and so forth. Remember that, the cycles are repeated. And then finally, the emotionally distant family, and they don't appear to be having problems, but if you look inside the walls, there's no affection, there's no warmth, and so forth. So, I think that is a really good video. Go back and watch it, make your notes, and maybe apply it to your case, one of the case studies, if you like, if you would like to compare family systems theory. So how do these families change? How do we use system theory to change families? Well, as we've said, the system theory recognizes that everything about a family is interconnected. So the way that one behaves is going to influence the other, and also in a reciprocal manner. And the therapy therefore aims to help people to heal. So healing and change occurs when family members gain insight about the dynamics. And then secondly, when they change repetitive patterns that hinder the family, learn more effective ways of communicating, change family roles, and develop more healthy boundaries. And that's just to name a few. And so if we look at that list of 5 dysfunctional families, can you imagine the people from those families healing? There would need to be connection, communication, apologies, understanding. If you think about that video between Barbara and her father, Charles, and her husband, he told her he loved her, right? But I reckon it was for the first time. He said, "I really do love you." So this sort of healing can come from communication and from being open, finally. So how do we do it? First of all, we have the initial interview. We do pre-session planning, in which the therapist and the family determine in advance who's going to attend. Obviously, with that example that you saw, we had Barbara attend, probably initially by herself, and then her husband came. And then once we found out that the father was, involved, he was brought along. But that came, I think, later. So that was the joining stage. The therapist joins with the family, talking on their affective tone, tempo, language, and structure. So the therapist actually comes in, and it's a technique that family systems therapists will use, is that they come in and start to contribute much in the same way that the family is. So they will use the same jargon. If someone, instead of someone saying depressed, if they say the word "I feel blue," the therapist will use the word blue. Okay, so that's part of it. It's you want to be part of what that family is like, so that they don't notice you so much, and so that you can kind of not stick out, but also influence and ask questions. Trust is built in that way. And then we get to the problem statement stage. So who gets to initially frame the problem? Well, sometimes the person who has the least involvement with the problem is addressed first. So then we're looking at what is the crux of the problem, what's really going on here. And that's when, techniques start to be used. Then there's the interaction stage. The therapist focuses in on determining the patterns of interaction sustaining the problem. So you identify the problem in that previous stage, and then the therapist tries to determine, kind of what's causing that, what's influencing that. And so with Barbara, we saw the father. The father's leaving the family was influencing the way she viewed and treated her husband. Goal setting, so then the therapist reaches an agreement with the family on a solvable problem and stated in behavioural terms, so that all involved will know when the problem has been solved. So the family is brought together and a goal is set, and it's an agreed goal, and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's behavioural because it's when somebody does something. That's what we mean by behavioural. And then the ending stage, the therapist sets the next appointment and indicates which family members will be present. So here are some of the assessment techniques that are used. So that's the process, and here are some of the techniques. So we do a thing called circular question, where the same question is asked of each family member. There is family sculpting, an assessment tool that examines the power and closeness in a family by asking each family member to physically arrange all the family members in order of relationship. So if you can imagine, a family in which there is animosity between a couple of them here and there, so you would get the person who wanted the therapy in the first place to put everybody in order of the way that they would normally relate in real life. Right? So the person themselves might be in the middle, in the beginning, at the end, wherever they are, they would recognize, who talks to who sits with who's sitting with mum or around mum or protecting mum, who's mainly with dad or protecting dad or sitting with dad, or the uncle or the aunt, whoever's involved. And then there's reenactment. So we asked the family to act out a situation rather than describe it. And then we looked at the genogram very briefly. So here is an example of circular questioning. I can make it work.
Hi, my name is Janetta Roman. I'm here, a therapist here at Grace Center. Thank you for coming in. You are?
I'm Kimberly.
Hi, Kimberly. May I call you Kimberly?
Aaron.
Aaron. May I call you Aaron? And you are?
And Christine.
And Christine. Nice to have you. And
Alyssa.
Alyssa. Okay. So who brought us all here together today?
I did.
You did? Okay.
There's just been a lot of tension between my daughter and his daughter, and we were hoping that we could get that fixed.
Okay. All right. Aaron, why do you think that we're here today?
I would agree. There's, in the blending of our family, which has been fairly recent, tensions between the daughters have been really high, especially since they're the same age and running the same circles. They were friends before we started dating and then got married, and so it's caused a lot of strife in terms of bringing us all together.
Okay. So why do you think we are here today?
Well, me and Dad thought it'd be a good idea, and so did Kimberly.
So it's obvious there that circular questioning is just asking the same question of, firstly, the person who brought you there, then, going on to everybody else and hearing the answer, but also allowing, it also allows the other family members to hear the answer as well. I've got another video here. This is a reenactment technique. Remember we talked about the different techniques. Stuck here. Okay. Taking a while, sorry about that. Do not adjust your sets. We're still waiting for it to load. Yeah, I'm going to read. See if it'll load now. There we go.
Nancy, Charlie, I noticed in some of our previous sessions that there was pretty palpable tension between the two of you. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit where that tension is coming from in your relationship.
Yeah, I'm so sick and tired of Charlie's compulsive lying. I feel like I can't trust him with anything, and I'm always worrying.
That seems about right.
I'm wondering if maybe the two of you could act out a fight that you've had recently.
Well, just the other day, he came back from the store with nothing I asked him to get.
Could you tell me what you said to him?
I said, Charlie, you always do everything wrong. I have to do everything around the house by myself. You act like one of the kids.
There's nothing I can do.
Charlie, what do you mean by that?
She's the best wife in the world, same as my mother. But I feel like I can never do enough for her. I don't feel like a parent at all.
I can sense some of the frustration that you're feeling. Nancy, do you think you would be less anxious and stressed out with Charlie if the two of you shared responsibilities more together?
Yeah, I do.
And Charlie, do you feel like you'd be more empowered as a parent and feel like you had that father role there if you shared responsibilities more, Nancy?
I do.
Okay, so what you have there is people just, the therapist getting them to play out, what it was like, what it is like for them to experience each other. And so they get to reenact it, and then maybe, the therapist can provide insight. So what is a genogram? This is normally a tutorial activity, but I thought I would bring it up now, and maybe you can also discuss it with your lecturer. The genogram is used by family therapists, and you saw it being used before with Barbara and Charles the father. It's used to lay out how everybody interconnects with each other, and there is a particular way of sort of displaying who's who. So circle is the female and square is the male. The order of birth is laid out in order when you sort of write them down. So what I mean by that is, here is the firstborn, here is the secondborn, here is the thirdborn, and so forth. I think it would be good if you research into genograms and done, and if you did a genogram of your own family, including who married who, who separated from who, how many children, the deaths, and so forth. And it might be worthwhile you watching this genogram video. So I've included it on here, but I'm not going to play it right now. So just make sure that you get, sort of to learn and understand what genograms are. So finally, let's do a summary. So families are systems of interconnected and interdependent individuals, none of whom can be understood in isolation from the system. So that is what the systems theory is about. It presupposes that everything is interconnected and everyone is interconnected. Members of the system are expected to respond to each other in a certain way according to their role, which is determined by relationship agreements. Within the boundaries of the system, patterns develop as certain family members' behaviour is caused by and causes other family members' behaviour in predictable ways. So we looked at Barbara and Charles, her father. She acted a certain way towards her husband because of that. We looked at that video there where the girls were being interviewed in that family therapy circular questioning, in which they're looking to find out what sort of pattern has been repeated, to find it, to eventually come up with kind of what was causing that particular family member's sort of upset. And so maintaining the same pattern of behaviours within a system may lead to balance in the family, but also to dysfunction. So that behaviour or that, that upset isn't intentional, because all everybody's trying to do is just keep the peace. But, problems start when one person says, listen, I'm not at peace. This is my problem. And so a family therapist or family systems therapist is ideal. And the changing roles may maintain the stability in the relationship, but it may also push the family towards a different equilibrium, which might not be a bad thing sometimes. And this new equilibrium may lead to dysfunction when it is bad. For example, as the wife may not be able to maintain an overachieving role over a long period of time. So, for example, if and this happens quite a lot. The wife is very high functioning, and I'm talking very traditional sort of setups here. The wife is very high functioning with the kids and then may also take on a job, and the husband has been used to the wife being in charge of the kids, but may come to a point where she goes, I can't take this anymore, all the pressure is on me, I also work, you do nothing, she says to her husband perhaps. Why are you doing nothing? Well, he says, because you've always done it, you see. And so that equilibrium of her always doing it has led to dysfunction. Okay, please have a look at GenePro. It is the, it's sort of information there about family systems theory. I've just clicked it so you can have a look. If you choose to use this if you choose to use family systems in your final assessment, go ahead and research it here. We've got all about family systems therapy, the family system. It was created by I can't remember his first name, Murray Bowen, and there's just sort of an interesting, or some different ways of understanding family systems theory. And there you've got how you can create a genogram and so forth. And so I think it would be a really interesting theory to actually apply to one of the case studies. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. That brings us to the end of family systems theory. I'm going to do another video on feminist theory. So I'll see you real soon. Bye now.